This week, road trips, dirt, and sewing. Ooh. So... Hi.
Howdy.
Welcome back, Jack.
You made it. And we are on week 5.
Never thought we'd make it this far.
That's at least 4 more than we thought we'd do.
Welcome. What's up with your mug?
So, I think that's enough said.
Oh, it's true.
Fun fact, that's pretty much exactly what I look like if I try to play tennis. Tell me about your mug.
Merry Christmas. How about Google? What's in your recent Google?
I've got a few exciting Google searches this week. We've got, where's the closest Wells Fargo? I know, fancy.
Practical.
I've got permeate, because I was writing an email and I was trying to remember if permeate meant what I wanted it to mean. The third and best of my recent Google searches is omnivore shirt. But it really lays out kind of the scientific breakdown of the different types of herbivores, carnivores. You've got omnivores, of course, eat both. And unbeknownst to us up until this point, there's actually a fourth category called the omnivore. And enjoy this photo.
Punny. Nicole Reyes, Billie Holiday, Salt and Pepper. Sometimes you need your 90s R&B.
I had a steak with a salt and pepper on it. Steak was like, I've been assaulted.
We got a $5 word this week?
We do. And this is a word that if you've been around me for any amount of time, you've probably actually heard this one before. The word is vicissitude. Use that one often. And I've also made up my own parts of speech around that one, so I've used it as vicissitudinous.
Vicissitudity.
So vicissitude, it basically is the antonym, so it's the opposite of serendipity. So vicissitude is an unexpected, unpleasant surprise. So what's something that made you smile this week?
Oh, Monday. I took old Yeller out for a joyride. I was going to see if I could make it to Saguaro Lakes.
Ooh.
And got that far and it felt so good out. I just drove right on up to Woods Canyon. And it did great. So
that's a good sign.
Yep, goes to show. If you have a 60-year-old car with 1 million miles on it, you're good to go.
Oh, it's like the one that Jimmy Fallon always makes fun of, Rob something or other.
Oh, Ford or whatever.
Rob Ford. That's good. And then just like zoom in on you right there. That'd be great.
So over the last 2 weeks, I've driven a couple thousand miles in my spare time. That included a couple turnaround trips from California, including over this last weekend, memorial service, where we got to see a lot of extended family, which was cool. We only had 6 hours to drive back, but like the Greers had, I don't know, more. What if we talk about how to reduce road fatigue? When you're driving long distances. All right, so long distances can be tiring. So here's a couple tips to keep you fresh on your trip. Make sure that your chair has proper back support, arch support. You want to ensure that your legs, when possible, are perpendicular, not leaned in, not too far out, but that you're reducing joint stress and that you're increasing good circulation. 10 and 2 is still a great rule of thumb. Use cruise control if you have it, because not only will it keep you from being pulled over, but it'll also allow your legs to be handy dandy. Sometimes if you get really tired, you can always read a book.
Reading the book, y'all. I'm reading the book. Don't you ever interrupt me while I'm reading the book.
And this is a real page turner. Or alternatively, you can listen to an audiobook. How do you reduce fatigue when you're not driving in a modern vehicle? I'm so glad you asked. Here is a non-modern vehicle. No cruise control, no power or anything. A little bit of play in the steering wheel just to keep it fun every time the wind changes course. The car goes like this. You got this nice bench seat that goes across. And I find it's very comfortable to lay your arm back like this. It makes long road trips even longer. Hope that helps, Mike. Nom nom nom. Wait, what made you smile?
On Saturday, I got to go out for a hike, and we're also starting to get into our bordering of the fall season, which means we're having some days where we're under 100, which is nice. Shout out to under 100. Much, much cooler. Down feathers.
You actually just have like 50 geese like taped to you for warmth.
Nobody got time for that. And then that got me thinking about the superhero of the faith. So of course, 2 weeks ago we had Super Paul, which was neat. And last week we had
Crazy Slave Girl Wonder Woman.
That's the one. And this week, kind of shouting back a little farther back in time, but I was thinking about Elisha. And Elisha was cool because he was actually the protege of Elijah. He basically asks for a double portion of the Spirit of God that was on Elijah's life. And God actually gave him that request, which I thought was really cool. So he started off looking like Kevin Hart, and then he went, time for something profound.
I'm having trouble today.
Hey, remember when stuff was blowing up? Like, kaboom!
So we've been starting on this concept, talking through what the kingdom is, or the kingdom is like, and looking at some of the parables of Jesus and the way that those create a context for how we understand God and how we interpret Scripture. And so last week we were in Matthew 13. This week we thought we'd shake things up a bit.
Whoa.
And
go to Matthew 13.
Matthew 13 again. So,
we're moving backwards now. So.
Yeah. So starting in verse 1, Jesus talks about the parable of the sower or the farmer. And you see how the crowds are packing in. And in this agrarian society where people are farmers, the vast majority of people are farmers, he's spoken what could be most plainly understood by them. And then he goes on to explain it implicitly. Even after he says what the parable is, he goes through specifically and says what each of these four soils means. So let's read the explanation part, starting in verse 18 of Matthew 13. Study the story of the farmer planting seed. When anyone hears news of the kingdom and doesn't take it in, it just remains on the surface. And so the evil one comes along and plucks it right out of that person's heart. This is the seed the farmer scatters on the road. The seed cast in the gravel, this is the person who hears and instantly responds with enthusiasm, but there is no soil of character, and so when the emotions wear off and some difficulty arrives, there is nothing to show for it. The seed cast in the weeds is the person who hears the kingdom news, but weeds of worry and illusions about getting more and wanting everything under the sun strangle what was heard, and nothing comes of it. The seed cast on good earth is the person who hears and takes in the news and then produces a harvest beyond his wildest dreams. Vote for Pedro and your wildest dreams will come true.
build you a cake or something.
Yeah. So the four types of soils that are being talked here, or hearts, of those who are hearers of the word, is the hard path, where the birds or the enemy swings in and eats or steals the seed. There's the rocky places, which are people who have heard the word, but they are not deeply rooted in the word, and so they quickly forget whenever life's bad circumstances or tragedy strikes, if they feel like the rug's been ripped out from underneath them, and they quickly forget. There's thorns or weeds. These are people who, they may, for all purposes, be well-intending believers or Christians, but they're focused more on this life than eternity, and as such, they bear no fruit. And then the fourth type is good soil, which produces crops. I love how other translations say 100-fold, or even 60-fold, or even 30-fold. I don't know why they count down, but that's the way it is.
But wait, there's more!
Even 1-fold.
Little seed goes.
You've probably heard this passage read multiple times and often equate it to your personal application as a hearer of the word. Mm-hmm. And that may be the case, but keep in mind, in the beginning of this passage, Jesus is talking to the masses, and in an agrarian society, most people were farming, or at least very familiar
yeah.
with the farming industry. So as he's talking to them, they would have aligned themselves and their role in this parable more as the sower or the farmer than they would have as the hearer. Why would Jesus talk about farmers sprinkling perfectly good seed on every soil indiscriminately?
Out of context in our modern culture, we tend to maybe superimpose this false belief that a soil condition is fixed. And that if it's a rocky soil or if it's a thorny soil, that's how it's always been, that's how it's always going to be, and there's nothing you can do to change it.
You could tell it's a thorny soil because of the way it is. But it doesn't have to be.
But it doesn't have to be. There's actually things that you can do to amend soil or to add to it or to till it and to work it up. And it made me think of this TED Talk that we had seen a couple of years back, and it was about reversing the desertification process. Easy for me to say. But it was kind of cool. They did a few case studies where they took this desolate desert, just wasteland, and they brought in a lot of livestock and had them essentially just live there to trample it, to kick up the soil, to eat there and do all their process. And over the course of time, these formerly desolate wastelands became these thriving oasis areas, which to me is fascinating on the one hand, but also incredibly reassuring as a metaphor. There is something that we can do to affect change in the soil condition of our heart as well.
And Jesus' audience would have understood this as part of their role as sowers of the seed, is to help till and improve the soil, the conditions for people, for those who are hearers of the word.
Yeah.
So may you go forth and sow much good seed and not be afraid of doing the hard work of helping to till the soil in the hearts of those who would be hearers of the word.
That'll do.
That'll do, donkey.
That'll do, pig.